All right, we'll just give everybody a couple minutes to queue on in. But I will drop in the link for the decisions days in the chat to everyone. So that is ready to go. All right, we'll kick off. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, depending where you are in the world. My name is Morgan Russell, and my pronouns are they, them. I've been with Decisions for a year and a half. Happy to be hosting our Lunch and Learn today. We'll also want to be spotlighting our upcoming event, Decisions Days, which will be October 4th through 6th. And that'll be an in-person event in Norfolk, Virginia, hosted as kind of like this all-day event, kind of like a convention of different things, but just a decisions convention. So here we've got some of the topics laid out of what we'll have meetings and events for. You can get to it and register, find more information about it at that link that I dropped in the chat. But you can also navigate to it by going to our regular website, decisions.com. And at the very top, there will be a button to get more information there. And let me navigate over to that as well. So this is what that link will take you to. And just has further information as well as the ability to go ahead and reserve your spot. Again, it's an in-person event, so you would have to travel potentially to Norfolk, Virginia, USA, if you would like to attend. And it's got that outline of events there for this October. And at the top of our website, it's this button here to hit register now to navigate you to Decisions Days, little registration form for you. All right, but just like usual, we're open to any and all questions. Feel free to raise your hand. You can come off mute, verbalize your question, or throw your question in the chat and we'll answer it that way.
But first of all, I want to say happy birthday, Morgan.
Oh, thanks so much, Tyler. Yes, it is my birthday today. So it's the best Lunch and Learn and Decision Day promo
Ever.
Thanks so much. Yeah, and I do have Tyler Hines with me as co-host to answer y'all's questions as well. So we're happy and ready to go. I'll just navigate over to, I've got a few decisions environments up. I think this one's 7.5, this one, my local's in 7.0. And then we have a version of 6 that is in 6.12. So we can look at some different stuff there if your question pertains to 6 or 7. And if we don't have any questions, I've been working on a bingo project that we can look at in my local environment. We can mess around with for a little bit there, just to kind of walk through some stuff. So as you put some questions in, I'll just open that up for us on my local environment. It's in training bingo. And a few weeks back, I believe we started, and I'll just give a brief introduction of this project. So this was built by one of our previous, our SEs, Bracy, who built a bingo project. So as a team, we could play bingo together over a Zoom call during quarantine. So kind of just a bonding team exercise. So I built it all in Decisions. So this was a project that was distributed through the company so we could all download, make your own bingo card and play together. But since then, I've taken the project and kind of gone through and kind of cleaned it up a little bit. So we can look into this flow, the generate bingo row flow, which was the flow we looked at together maybe on the 11th, I would like to say, one of the past Lunch and Learns that I hosted. So what we did in here, there was previously a whole bunch of loops being done to calculate and go through and get each letter. So we subflowed that out. So now we made this a subflow. So you pass in the particular bingo list, so the list of rows, which letter you're wanting to update, list of all the letters there from that row. and then the max and min for what numbers you're going to be generating. So if we look inside of this flow, see what it's doing here. So we're just getting a random number, and the max and min are inputs, meaning we dictate that on the outside of our flow. This was because for bingo rows, we wanted different numbers to be displayed in different sections. So for B, we passed in that 1 through 15. And basically we go through and we say, okay, let's get that random number. We go to this rule, which is just a object is null default rule that's indecisions. So object is null is that step here. And then you just pass in whatever object you want to check to see if it's null. So since we pass in our bingo row list, we want to see if that's null. If it is, we move on. If it is not null, we go through and check to see what's in the list. So we're saying, okay, there's already something in the row for B. We want to see if what we just came up with is already in the list, because we don't want duplicates. For your bingo row, you want just one of each number across it. So we go ahead and use this also default decisions rule. The string is in list, the case insensitive one. So we did just get a question pop up. So I will go ahead and read that for us. So we just got a question from Christopher. We have editing legacy visibility rules in 7. Can it be done? I believe so.
I didn't mean to interrupt your bingo demonstration.
Oh, no worries. Bingo can wait. Bingo will always be here for us if we need it. I can run this real quick if y'all want to just kind of see how it runs before we hop over to that. So actually I didn't do any changes. But when you run just the generate bingo card flow, it just will show up a bingo card. So it randomly gets the letters and generates it in a report viewer. So that's kind of what we've been editing here. But let's go ahead and look at a visibility rule on a form. So let me go back to our lunch and learn folder. I'm in 7.0, so that'll work for us. Let's create a form. I'll just make a test form for us here. And your visibility rules and data flows are accessible still in 7, even though they are kind of tucked under that legacy heading here. They are still available for you to add, create, as well as edit there. So you definitely can do it. And I'll show us how you could do it. So if we wanted just to add a new visibility rule, before I do that, drag out a quick button and something to hide for us. So we'll just put a text box. Whoop. Let's see if we can type for us. There we go. So we got a text box and its label there, and we'll make our visibility rule. So same place you'd go to navigate for before, click anywhere in the empty space, as well as in the Explorer, clicking on the surface to get the overall form's properties. You'll just scroll down a little bit. You have active form flows, which are now the advanced way to, and new in 7 way to hide as well as enable change data on your flows, or excuse me, on your forms, but you still have access to all your legacy ones. So when you import from 6 to 7, your data flows and visibility rules will be in here if you had any on the form. So if we wanted to still use them, you still can. If we want to hide our text box and label.
Well, while Morgan is doing that, there's an important thing to note about the behavior of the visibility, validation, and outcome rules is between 6 and 7. Is in version 6, if you just create a normal rule, you can just pick that rule and use it as a visibility, validation, or an outcome rule. In decision 7, it's actually its own form behavior. So if Morgan just created a normal rule and then try to pick that rule for the validation, decision 7 won't find it because it doesn't have that validation visibility form behavior. So that's a behavior difference that you'll want to be aware of if you're trying to pick a normal default rule behavior as a visibility rule. You can't do that in 7. You have to change that rule behavior
Oh,
to get that to work. So
gotcha. So you can't
Mhm.
use this one, just a default that you're picking. So the
Mhm.
is true Boolean
mhm.
is not selectable here. All right, let me see. Pick.
So
I can still pick that. Update.
we can change the rule. So when we're defining the rule, we can define a type of rule that is then available, or is that strictly that it's just not, they just can't be shared across forms anymore?
They can be. It's just you have to change the behavior of that rule. So that's just the
This-
thing you might want to be aware of.
So this kind of rule here. So value is true. This is a default decisions rule that I've selected. Are you saying that I have to do
So
something additional to?
no, so I'm talking about, let's say you created your own custom rule. You created in your rule designer, you created a normal
Oh,
default
okay. Yes.
rule,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Mhm.
That won't work. That's
Yeah,
already
if
has
you
that
create it-
form, that rule
Mhm.
behavior. Yeah.
Exactly. So if you created it right here, like through the steps, when you go to visibility rules, it will create with this particular kind of rule. So it has that behavior already on it. Yeah. If you want to use any other rule, just out of the box when you make it, you have to select that. But
Mhm.
most likely if you already have a rule on here, it's already going to have that behavior type
Mhm.
selected. Real quick, just to show what J-Rod is talking about for us. So if you go ahead and just create any rule and just create new, if you don't change it, it's behavior here and just use the default statement rule, it won't have this function here, form rule visibility. So if we just wanted to create this simple statement rule, we could build out the logic and everything for it. But when you go to select it in your form, it won't actually be there. So in order to change it, it would be over in this upper right-hand corner. Right now it's just statement rule. So you'd want to change it to the form validation / visibility rule. That'll make it accessible in your visibility rule section on your form. So that I believe is still the same in 6. There might have been change on how it's shown potentially, but same thing happens if you create a default rule in 6. It's not going to have this behavior type off the bat. You would have to create the rule. If you know you want it to be a visibility rule off the bat, you can just pick that kind of rule here, that form rule validation / visibility, if you wanted
So
to use
I
it for
believe
that.
that is the difference that I'm talking about, Morgan. In version 6, I believe when you create a default rule, I'll test it out right now. I can just pick that rule as my validation rule or my
Mhm.
visibility rule. But in 7, I have to set the behavior. But I could be wrong. Let me check. And
Yeah, let
I'll
me make a
pop up.
quick statement rule for us. I'm in 6 now, just moved over to the Biscarma environment. So here you're in 6, and you can change that form behavior as well. This is 6.12. So it might be a version difference in 6, but same kind of thing there. You can change it from default rule behavior. So it's a different name. Previously in 7, that was statement rule. So in 6 as well, if you want it to be shown on a visibility and used in that format, you have to change it to that form behavior. So, but if you go through in either version, if you go through and create the rule in that, setup prompts where you click on first the you're in the form and you add a visibility rule and you hit create that rule there, then it will off the bat have that type for you. So if we hit create here, let's say rule 2, check behavior, and we hit create for that. Off the bat, we'll take a look and it's already got that form rule validation / visibility type for us. So across those versions, same kind of thing applies there. Was that your question, or would you like to look further into just looking at the visibility rule?
No, I think I got my answer. My exposure to release 7 has basically been at a couple of demonstrations, not really. We haven't actually installed it anywhere in our company, so I'm just sort of thinking ahead to when we move. Some things change, and
oh yeah, absolutely, good to be cautious of that. But yeah, you can still edit them, add them, use them like you did before, but now you do have the option to use active form flows. And active form flows are nice just because they kind of simplify it, and you can use one form flow to do multiple things. You still have, now it's kind of a more streamlined form here that shows the triggers, where I believe it was still called triggers before. It's whatever kicks off your either your data flow or your visibility rule to run would be your trigger. So depending on what components you have on your form, this will change and have more things available. So since it's a text box, we have the options to have this run whenever a value is changed in the text box. They've stopped typing, entered, exit, and such. You can also still have the familiar options of running this form flow at startup and auto run at a time and such. But when we actually go and edit it, by default, it gives it just, I think, rule 1 or form 1 name. You can change it here. The active form flows, it's important to note that they are created in the parent folder. You know, so if you started editing a flow, put in your form, they're created in the parent folder of that, wherever you opened up first and started working, and they are a hidden element. So that's something to be aware of if you use them. And I do think they're great to use. This rule. So to replace a visibility rule or just to make a new one, if you're building a form in 7, you can have some kind of rule. So now you have access to the full flow designer when you want to process logic, update something. So if we wanted to just have maybe a string equals rule to
String
check
match.
who's the user. Oh yeah, there's string match if you have lots of options, but if we're just looking for one particular thing, we can use string equals. So if you wanted to have a whole bunch of different paths coming off, string match is great. But say if I'm just looking for the current user to be me, I can just use this one particular. So now in your, when you go to what's available in your flow, you have form data, and that's all the data that's on your form. So you have the actual text box, the contents of it, and that label that we added. If you have more components, you'll have more data here. You also have access to, these are a bunch of lookup lists. So if you have anything on lookup list, they'll be accessible as well. You have flow data, which is going to have things like your current user email. That's what I'm checking here. But if we wanted to check to see if the text box potentially showed something, you would go to form data and check the actual text box. So we named that one hide this box. So that's our text box that we added. And you can check, so what's written in their text box. We can say that value is what we're checking. So whatever they type here, we're going to check what's written there. And I'm just going to check versus a constant thing versus my email. So you can perform whatever logic you'd like ahead of it. So right now this is checking that the text box value equals my name, my email address. And whether it goes true or false, you can then perform things on the form or carry out more logic if you needed to. But all the cool new additions for the active form flow is these form rules. This step category is only available if you're working in an active form flow. You can always check if it's an active form flow based off of the behavior type. It will be non-editable and it'll be a form rule flow for an active form flow. But form rule steps have particular things that take actions on the items and components on your form. So you can clear validations, set validations, enable and disable controls, you know, whether they're not interactable and they get grayed out or not. You can choose to exit a form entirely. You can get a value. Most of this get value just gets the particular controls what it's set to, but that's also accessible in your form data from the flow data here. Then you also can hide. So hide and show are going to be your visibility components. So based off whether this is true or false, we could choose to either hide or show something. Move that. And you can, there's just like the set variables and such. There's also, I believe, hide and show multiple. Yeah, so we have hide and show here for us. So then you just pick the control initially, and then based off of the control you select, it'll populate. Actually, this one is just hide and show, so I won't. If you have the set control, it'll give you a second prompt that'll come up after you've selected it. So all your controls are going to be in your form data. So if we're going to set the value on our text box, we'd select the text box first. And then it's going to give us this follow-up prompt of saying, okay, since this is a text box, it's looking at a string, what do you want to set that value to? You can set it to something else then. Since we're on the show path, we're updating the value to test. And we're going to hide, let's just hide the label since we're changing the value on the text box. So we just pick our text box, and that's all you need to do for the show as well as the hide control steps there. Is just picking which component you wish to hide or show. And we're going to just delete that one since we're not using it. Real quick, I'm just going to try and clean this up a little bit. And then we'll test it out. This is nice. So you can just use a lot of logic here to build out the things you're doing. Similar to a data flow, just the same. You can't put anything that's going to make this flow go async or else it will not run for you. So no forms in here.
Is it possible for one of these flows to call a similar flow type to?
You can call a subflow in here.
Okay. I'm thinking of like a subflow that would change a bunch of controls.
Yes, you can do that. So you can pass in form data to a subflow. So if it was used across different things, as long as the particular, there's actually just the data that's moved through. So you'd pass in form data or the form control data into it, and you can update it that way. So I just closed and saved that active form flow. And let's check on our triggers here. So we got it when value changed. That should be good. And we'll hit OK. I've seen this happen before. So it did actually put in there. So I'm just going to close this and see if it saved for us. So there it is. This extra one must have double clicked there, popped up, even though that one is empty. So I'm just going to get rid of that one for us. This is the visible test that we built. And if we check to see, the name did update up top for us after I updated it here in the info tag. So that is ready to go. And in order to test this out, we'll just throw it into a flow. So let's quickly create a little flow. Let's do test one is what did I name that form? I don't know. We'll find it through recents. So drag out our show form step. If you want it to be an assigned form, it could be an add task that just by default makes your form step already populated as the assigned type instead of the in session type. But we don't need it to be an assignment. And then we'll pick existing. You have recent section now. So which of my test forms? It's just this simple one here with our simple text box. So you get a preview of the recent things you've worked on that are options for you to select. And I'll just connect that up. And then our little yellow icon is telling us that we've got some inputs there. Just align this for us, distribute it horizontally. And we'll just have it be ignore off the bat, meaning we don't need any data populated off the bat. We're going to provide it when we fill it out. So then we're going to just debug that form. So now we have it off the bat. Let's change it to something that's not equal to Morgan. So, and not equal to test. So we'll just write hello. And so we saw that active form ran and updated the value. And we can see it in the debugger, how it ran. So it went through and we can right click, see what was the input and output. So we said, is this string equal to this string? What we typed in was hello. And the second string was morgan@decisions.com. So they are not equal. So we went down our false path. So we went down the show control. So we showed our label and then we set the control value on the text box that we just typed in to say test. So now if we run it again by actually writing Morgan, oh, see, this one went too fast for us. Let's see if I can go real quick. Nope. So that's one thing of it. It's too quick for us on the value change. So maybe we'll have to change our trigger to something that gives us more time there.
So this is how we do a voting machine.
Just have it run. You gotta put it in so quick. So back on our form, if we go to our active form flow, you can edit your trigger. Instead of value changed, maybe we exited the box instead. So I'll give this a go. Save and close. And back in the flow, we'll then debug that. Or I could populate it from the outside instead. Copy it for me for later. And now it hid our box instead of our label. So I must have hooked that up there, but it did hide it. So if we look at the second time it ran, we went down our hide control path. Let's see, what do we had it set to? Yep, I did have it hide the text box. So that was my mapping versus anything else there. But yeah, that's just a quick demo of the hide and show functionality that is in our active form flows now versus a visibility rule. So you have some more control of your data, as well as can do multiple things in just one active form flow.
A big takeaway for active form flows in regards to validations too, is that when you have when you throw a fatal validation on a control. So if Morgan said that this text box equaled Jared and said, Jared's not allowed and threw a fatal validation, decision 7 will still allow Morgan to submit that form and allow it to go through. The reason why is because a default setting that says run this validation on all outcomes is unchecked in version 7. In version 6, it was checked by default. So that's why whenever you had a fatal validation thrown in version 6, it would prevent the user from proceeding through from submitting the form. But in version 7, if you create, using an active form flow, create a fatal validation, you must check the box that says run on all outcomes, so that it will prevent the user from running the form if a fatal error is thrown.
So where is that box for running on all outcomes?
Sure. So on your set validations attached to the form control.
To this step.
Yeah, you had that. So select from flow, select the form control. So in this case, the text box. And then done. And then the validation issue, you want to build the array because we only want one. And then on the first one, we want to build the data on that one. And then now you can say, what's the break level? Set that to constant, say fatal, and then say message, go away, Jared, we don't want you on the call, or something, whatever you want. There you go, fun times is good. All right, so now, based on the rule that's going to evaluate that Morgan has, when we run this form, it's going to display the validation. So close out, and then scroll, or go back to the active form flow section.
This one here.
Yep, scroll all the way down where it says run on all outcomes and the button run for outcomes. You want to make sure that's checked. Leave it unchecked, for example, Morgan, and let's click OK and let's run this form. And what we want to demonstrate is that the form will run. It will throw the validation based on the rule criteria that has been set. And then it should, so yeah. So hover over it. So fun times, that's the validation. Now go ahead and click the button.
So it still lets us submit even though it was fatal.
So what Morgan has to do is set that control to run on all outcomes, and then it'll work. So that's just something to be aware of.
Editor.
Yeah.
So it's on the active form flow, you said?
Exactly. So yeah, Chris, that's just a thing to be aware of. If you're using a lot of validations in your forms and you want to use active form flows in version 7, you must make sure that it says run on all outcomes or run on the specific outcome you want that text box to block or that form control to block, and then it won't allow the form to proceed.
Okay, so that applies the validations that you set here onto this outcome. Gotcha.
You got it.
Very cool. Thanks so much.
You got the touch. All right, I'll stop singing.
No worries there. Let me just debug that and now make sure that when we send through that name, we hit our label up top, set this validation, fun times, and now we cannot submit because of that validation. So that is a really good trick there to check on that.
What step did you use to create that?
Validation.
Yeah.
Sure thing. So it's just set validations. So again, this is one of the steps that is only available in active form flows. And I can go back to that if we'd like to look at that for us. So once we get there on our default settings, we go back to active form flow and we'll edit that active form flow. And this step here is set validation, and it's found under the form rules heading, available just in your active form flows. So a flow that has the behavior type form rule flow. And so when you set the validations, just like Jared had walked us through, you pick the control that you wanted to display on. So for this, it's that text box that, then outlined in red if it was set. And then you set the message that you want it to be displayed in. Like all components, you can have this be something that was dynamic or, merge text to build it and such. And then you can also have the break level vary as well, and could be, selected from flow.
It's more streamlined than what we do in 6.
Yeah, it was definitely a huge facelift on how we can manipulate data on a form. So I think they've been highly useful and beneficial to making things run quickly and check multiple things with one flow and one thing to edit. So I like them a lot. Okay, looks like we have a question. So we've got in a customer support portal, is there a way to get from the T ticket to its associated DT and vice versa? Let's see, in this customer support portal, is that on Tirade? Or is that, I'm not sure where that portal is. Who do we have online for customer success? Oh, it's just on support. Okay. See if it's got my stuff. Nope. One sec there. Log in real quick for us. If my password will behave. I may be logged out of Tirade or locked out. Let's see one more time for us. Yeah, so right now, let me unpause. Right now, I'm not able to get into Tirade. Let's see. Tyler, do you have access to Tirade currently? Or anybody is aware of?
I have access to Tirade. What are you trying to look for?
So we're trying to answer for Jeff here, if there's a way to get to the ticket that's associated to a DT and moving between the two of them.
I think there is.
Yeah,
I thought it
I
was.
definitely think there should be. Right now.
Do you not have a login, Jeff, for support.decisions.com? Because I believe there's a customer portal side.
Yeah, I do have a login.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah, and right now, for some reason, my Tirade it's not letting me in. So if somebody else wanted to share and try and step through that, I can stop sharing if.
Do you happen to have the DT or the ticket number you're looking for?
I can give you an example.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I definitely think they should be linked together and have some way to access them, but I haven't done it personally. for a while.
Let's see, find one here that's assigned to development. T038287.
Let's see, T020387.
038287.
I can type that in the chat. I didn't catch it, sorry.
Oh, sure.
Thanks.
Now, I did discover yesterday after I sent this in, when I was playing around in here, if I look at the DT list by clicking DTs on the top right, if you click on a DT line item, it actually opens up the T ticket associated with it. So, which I don't know if that's a bug or not, or maybe that's what it's supposed to do. But I was kind of looking for the other way, like if I'm in a T ticket, how can I find out if there's a DT associated to it other than by name?
That's a good question. Here's what I'll do. I'm just going to hop, skip, and a jump to the support manager, Brian Thomas, and I'll ask if there's a way. And in the meantime, if anyone else has any questions, we can continue on, and I'll relay that information to you once I find out.
Cool, thanks.
Awesome, thanks so much, Jared. Let me share my screen again for us. I don't know why. I also just sent the request to reset my password, so hopefully everyone will get Tirade working and support at decisions being their friend. Yeah, but that was our active form flow good times there. Let's see, did I have bingo? I had bingo here. But yeah, I definitely like them a lot. Disabling controls, exiting, it's a lot of useful tools at your disposal there. So I'm just going to close out of our very beautiful form. And if anybody else has any questions while we're working on that issue there for Jeff to get that addressed, feel free to.
I got that information, Jeff. So basically the relation is you can go from the dev ticket to the ticket, but not the other way around. That just hasn't been built out in the Tirade system or in our CRM system. So it's only that one-way relation, go to the dev ticket to the ticket.
Okay, thanks. That's fine. I mean, it's not impossible to find it.
Yeah.
That would be convenient.
Yeah, and if nobody has any questions, maybe I'll just walk through this bingo. This is the main flow of the bingo generation card, and a little bit early today, but we'll give some people some time if they've got anything. But this is the main flow of our bingo generating system. So this is the one we ran from outside the flow, so not in debugger earlier to generate our card. So I can step through what it's doing here. So to start us off, we use a for loop, which is very similar to a for each loop, except it doesn't run for each iteration of a list. It runs for the number of times that you provide it. So an int there. So for this one, we've just set it to a constant 5 going through. And the item, which is the number, the times that it's gone through, so which iteration it's currently on, you can name that as a variable, so you can manipulate your data that way. So it goes through 5 times. Each time it goes through, it creates a bingo row. So we have one row in our bingo card, and it's just an empty row here. This is just a create data step. And you can check that here in step information. This one is create this particular entity. So it's a create bingo row step actually there. So that's our user-defined type bingo row. So I believe bingo row is just a simple database structure. We've got a lot of structures. It might be a different one there, but we can check. Actually, it's a simple flow maybe because it's not actually saved. So flow data extensions. Nope. We can look at that in a sec, but we create our bingo row. And then from that bingo row, we get it by ID. So now we have that bingo row that we just created. Our output bingo row ID was the output of this create step. So we get the bingo row, and that's what we pass into our subflow, which we looked at earlier. It's that generate bingo row. And you pass in that row, and then the list of rows, and then go through, and that particular whatever iteration we're on is what you pass through as well. And on the output of it is the updated filled in bingo row, which we change value on. And then add that to our list. So the list of bingo rows is built here and updated consistently. So our new item is that bingo row that came out. I'm just saying bingo a lot, coming out of our subflow here. And then we add it to our original list, which is also created here and updated. So it changes value each time to have an updated list of those rows. And then our rows are then displayed on this form. So our bingo row list is passed into the form, and our form just has, I believe it's just a simple, just a simple database grid. And you set up the columns here are just bingo. So column for each letter there. And we can debug it and see as it happens here for us. So here's your end result. You're viewing that form with all your bingo cards, and they're randomly generated. So the numbers in the first column for B are a random number between 1 and 15, and so on and so forth for each of them. And then that mid one gets special treatment since it is a free space. So I can, the meat of this is actually in that generate bingo row. So it goes through each time. And that's why we wanted to subflow that section out. So in this one, we have each different subflow for generating each letter. And we have right here, this one section that's saying, okay, are we on the second loop? If we are on the second loop for N here, we want to add in that free space for it. So if we open up in our debugger and look at the different iterations and when it went through, let's see when we're on the second loop, it goes down. And instead of getting a random number for the letter N, it just updates it to say free space. And that's how we get our free space filled in there for N as its third row there, which I guess is our second iteration since we're starting at 0 there. So we go through each time, and if we wanted to, for each time this subflow is ran, we also have the different versions of this, because this is all one subflow that's being reused each time for each letter prompt, just with a different letter. So with different inputs, we go through and get the random number, check to see if if we've already added anything in this row. If so, we want to make sure that this number isn't already existing in that list. And that's kind of what goes down for every single one of these. And if it's false, it continues. But if it's true, so like this time on, let's see, maybe it's loop 1 or 2, we'll look at it. So we have 1 and 15. And we go through. Okay, the second time it was false. Let's look on the first execution. First execution, it was 2. We randomly generated 5, but 5 was already in the list. So instead, we went down the true path saying, yeah, this item is already in the list. So we want to get a different one. We don't want to write that same number twice to the list on our bingo card. And that's how that logic carries out there for us. And once that is done, it moves through each time. Oops, sorry, I went one row up. Goes through each time in that subflow for each letter, and then sends out the row. So each row goes through this. So we get this ran 5 times for us in each loop. And then that bingo row is added to our list. And then our whole list is shown on that data form. And that's the whole thing. Currently, it's only showing numbers for us. The goal is eventually to allow prompts here, so we can have like funny bingo ones where you provide the prompts. So regardless, like watching a movie, you want a bingo card for when the main character says the movie title or something similar. So working on creating a system where you can use the ints that are generated here to actually grab a prompt from maybe a truth table or another structure of items. So you can make it a little more dynamic than just being just the classic bingo with numbers here. But yeah, that's our bingo card generator at the moment. Anybody have any further questions or anything today? If not, we'll close up early on this Thursday and give you all 15 minutes. Yeah, no problem. Let me check. Okay, yeah, it was a simple database structure. I must have just not seen it in that list for our bingo rows here. So if we look at it, it's just properties for each letter. So that's why we're able to have those columns where, you know, each letter and then the different items there was built out. All right, y'all have a great one. Thanks so much for tuning in. And you have that link there if you're interested in finding out more about Decisions Days in October. Thanks so much.